Christmas, Christmas, I gave you my heart. All I want for Christmas is you. 525,600 minutes. Good morning, people. It is almost Christmas. We are officially at the end of the year. 'Tis the season and all that. It's the most magical time of year. Yes. And for us here in BookTube, what that means is that it's also a great time of year because we get to make and watch a lot of our favorite videos, right? The best of, the worst of, honorable mentions, dishonorable mentions, everything. So today I will be making my honorable mentions for 2017. I will be presenting you with 8 books that I read in 2017 that I gave 4 stars. I think 4 stars. It's probably like between 4 stars and 4.5, so it's kind of that gray area. But yeah, these are books that I thought were absolutely amazing. Still not as amazing and spectacular as the books that I will be showing you at the end of the year in my top 10 or top whatever books of the year. Those will be my absolute favorites. Most of them received 5 stars. So yeah, that's another video coming up at the end of the year. But for today, you will be taking a look into my honorable mentions. So these are books that were very, very close, but didn't make the cut. I hope you enjoy. These are the honorable mentions for 2017. So the first one is The Blue Girl by Laurie Foos. This is a very short novel. It is magical realism. It is very gothic and weird and dark and strange. And when I read this book, I basically just felt that I was under a spell and that there was this kind of treacly, dark substance just oozing through me. It's a story about this town and the people who live in this town and the families who live in this town. It's about their secrets, about their relationships. It's very character focused. It's a very character type of story. It is very creepy. If you like stuff like We Have Always Lived at the Castle or Shirley Jackson, it also gave me some vibes of the movie The Witch, which I loved, the movie The Village. It's just kind of dark and creepy without being just terrifying, like in your face, scary monsters and shit. It's just spellbindingly terrifying in its own way. It's the prose that Laurie Foos uses is really beautiful. It's kind of poetic, and it's like a lullaby that envelops you and just puts you under this kind of spell. I really liked this book. It got me out of my biggest reading slump that I had in 2017, so I really recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. Don't miss The Blue Girl. My next honorable mention is Idaho by Emily Ruskovich, and this is actually a book that I always thought that was going to make it into my favorites list at the end of the year, but there were just so many better books that I read that this was just very, 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 very close, but it didn't make the cut. Idaho was a novel that I really enjoyed reading in 2017. It is very depressing and very unsettling and uncomfortable, and it really confronts the reader with its humanity and what humanity really is, and what are the limitations of humanity. Death, body, memory, love. These are just some of the themes that this book explores. Family as well. It's a story that follows a different array of characters that are all suffering in some way or another and that are in very dire circumstances. It's a very tragic book, and it's a book that will unsettle you and that will depress you. But I found it spectacular, especially considering it was Emily Ruskovich's debut novel. I thought it was just magnificent. I would absolutely recommend this to anybody, and I gave it 4 stars. My next honorable mention is Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. This is a book that I actually never really talked about in my channel that much, except in a mini wrap up or like in a very, very small review, and I just kind of skimmed through it, but I never really talked about this book, and I don't know why. George Saunders is one of my favorite authors, even though I have only read like 2 of his books, but I just love the guy. So this was George Saunders' novel, debut novel, and it won the Man Booker, and probably deservedly so. I sort of struggled with this book near the ending, and that's why I didn't love it. I didn't fall head over heels in love with it. However, the more I thought about it, the more I still think about it, it's a book that is so special, so unique, and there's something like in its essence that it's just so moving and so different. And people have very strong opinions, whether positive or negative, but they have very strong opinions about this book. And when I read it originally, I was like, I liked it. I can definitely see why it's special and everything, but I was kind of left a little bit cold. I gave it 3.5 stars back when I read it, but the more I think about it, it's just kind of stuck with me. And it's a very unique book, and I'm still finding myself thinking about it and revisiting some scenes and some chapters. It's not my favorite book in the world, but I think it deserves 4 stars, and it absolutely deserves an honorable mention because it is really good. It's strange, and it's maybe not for everybody, but it is really unique. My next honorable mention is Vile Bodies. This is a novel written by Evelyn Waugh. It's about the kind of socialites, this kind of very narcissistic, egotistical generation of like in the 20s, sort of before the war. It takes place in London. It's so English, so British. It has this amazing sense of humor, this wit that is very characteristic. I just had a blast reading this book. It's told in a very strange way that maybe some people could find off-putting or weird, but I immediately clicked with it. It is incredibly fast-paced, and what I mean by the fact that it's written in a weird way is that it's very fast. It's kind of just a bunch of conversations, a bunch of parties, a bunch of people talking and gossiping at different parties, and there's not a lot of description of characters or places. It's just sort of like a wild ride, and it's very fast-paced, and you just go with it. So it might be maybe off-putting for some people, I don't know. I immediately clicked with it, and it was just such a great, fun ride. But at the same time, there's this kind of very serious subject matter at its core. The ending of this book is brutal. It is so kind of disjointed from the rest of the book, and I loved that. It's like Evelyn Waugh wanted to punch the reader in the face, because for I don't know, the first 280, so like the first 95% of the book, he just shows you this great fun ride and people having fun and drinking alcohol and dancing and doing crazy shit, and then at the ending, like in the last page, there's something that happens that's kind of a big punch to the face of the reader and to the characters, and everything falls apart. It's such a great book. It's such a great book. I really want to revisit it, and I really want to read more Evelyn Waugh. So if you have more recommendations about where to go next with this author, let me know. I gave Vile Bodies 4 stars. My next honorable mention is Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. This is a book that I have actually talked quite a lot about in my channel this year. I really loved it, and I loved discovering Samantha Schweblin's voice. She is a Latin American author. She originally wrote this in Spanish. It's called Distancia de Rescate in Spanish, and it was just published, translated to English and published in English this year, and it kind of became very popular on BookTube, and I'm kind of ashamed to say that I'd never heard of her, despite her being a Latin American author. I had never heard of her prior to the publication of this book in English, and the book in Spanish is so hard to find that I actually had to read it in English, which is just kind of a weird contradiction. Why am I Mexican and reading this Latin American work originally published and written in Spanish, and I'm reading it in English? Anyway, that's just my trip. This is very, very weird and very dark. I'm not going to say anything about the plot, because I think that this is the perfect book to pick up during a holiday or a vacation break or a weekend where you have nothing else to do and you just want to live the experience and just go with the flow of the book. It is very short. It is really tiny. You can probably read this. I mean, I am a very slow reader, and I still read it in like 2 days or under 2 days. It is very fast. It is really strange. It feels like you are hallucinating. That's how I would describe this experience. It feels like you are under the effect of some kind of drug. It's kind of magical. But it's never really clear exactly what happened. So if you like that kind of trippy experience, go with this one. I gave it 4 stars. My next honorable mention is Irlanda by Espido Freire. This is a Spanish novel, and I don't want to give anything away about this book, about the plot of this book. Just look at that cover. This is the perfect book for people who like the feeling, the themes, and the writing, and the overall feeling of We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. If you enjoy that weird, ghostly, surreal, very melancholy, slightly terrifying, and very gothic vibe of that kind of thing, or like Henry James, what's the name of the book? The Turn of the Screw, that kind of thing. This is just perfect for you. It is a stunning novel. It's so weird. It's so... Just read it. Just do yourself a favor and pick this up. Oh, and I gave it 4 stars. My next honorable mention is The Tiny Wife by Andrew Kaufman. This is a very short novel. It is magical realism. It's wacky and whimsical and wonderful, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It is the perfect thing to pick up in an afternoon that you just want to escape and read something that is fast-paced and funny, and really clever and quirky and different. More than anything else, what I loved about this book is that its type of magical realism inspired me to write a paper, a research paper, about psychoanalysis and magical realism, which I presented at the Mexican Society for Psychoanalysis here in Mexico City. So yeah, great read. And my last honorable mention for 2017 is none other than The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. This is a novel told in separate novellas that are interwoven into one narrative. It is a sprawling story. I really liked it. There were some parts of it that I enjoyed less than the others. There were some amazing ones, but overall, I really loved the experience. I gave it 4 stars, and if you are a little bit iffy to pick up David Mitchell, I suggest this one. So those are my honorable mentions for 2017. I am so happy with this year. I am so grateful just for having read everything that I read, both positive and negative. It's been an amazing reading year, and a lot of that has been because of you guys, because of your recommendations, because of this community that we have built for ourselves online called BookTube. It really, my reading experience on my reading year just would not be the same if it weren't for you guys out there watching and commenting and subscribing and just posting things, videos. So I'm really grateful for that. And let me say something. If these books that I talked about are honorable mentions, that is only because the books that are coming up in my favorites video, they're just so spectacular. Man, I cannot wait to make that video and share the amazingness of those books with you. But until that time, I say goodbye.